Hi, Serene. How are you?
Hi, how you doing?
Good, good, good. How are you? Your holiday was good?
Thank God. Yeah, beautiful. Thank God.
Great,
Really
great,
nice.
great. Thank God. Good to hear.
So how
Sari,
everybody?
I had a nice holiday, Sari?
I had a fabulous holiday. Very nice.
Good.
Yeah. How were you? How was Israel?
Israel was beyond words. Maybe I don't know. You can't really say, but maybe it was our nicest trip ever. You know, the country was so vibrant. It was so vibrant. It was extraordinary. People were out everywhere, and children, so many children, wherever you looked, children, and more and more and more and more. It was a remarkable thing to see. It was very, very exciting. It was a great time. The Israelis really came out in force to enjoy their country this trip. It was very, very beautiful, and I'm going to tell you a little about it just in the context of our learning tonight. Okay, so we'll get started. Hi, Joy. Welcome back. Hi, Jeanette. How are you?
How's
See
it
you.
going?
Hi, Ricky.
How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Happy holiday. It's over, but
Thank you.
sure it was beautiful.
Good luck. You guys were expecting. Good luck, huh? Good. Very nice. Good luck.
Thank you.
Watching it.
So I will start with just a brief story. Wanted to talk about Pesach takeaways. You know, the things that we all talked about a lot of things during Pesach, for sure. Just a couple of things that I think are important or exciting, relevant, that we can share tonight. I want to start with just a short story. So a number of years ago, it was actually more than a number, many, many years ago, we connected with an organization called Ateret Kohanim. And Mati Dan, their founder, set out on a mission. And his mission was to focus in the old city of Jerusalem and the areas immediately around it, to reclaim those areas that were once Jewish. There was a lot of settlement in Jerusalem, particularly in the old city and immediately around the old city. In the late 1800s, they called it Shivat Zion. A lot of Sfaradim, in terms of that effort to come back to the land, and the conditions were as difficult as you could imagine, and beyond that. When the Arabs rioted in the 20s and 30s, the late 20s and 30s, many of those neighborhoods emptied out of their Jews. That was the design and focus of the rioting, and stayed empty for a long time. In 1948, Jordan took some of these areas and controlled them. And it wasn't until the unification in 1967, when the city of Jerusalem and all of that area was unified, when people could start to think about going back to these areas. So with the launch of Ateret Kohanim, you have many, many homes and buildings and yeshivot in what's now called the Muslim quarter of the old city, which was all Jewish. Now you have Jewish families living there. You have Jewish men learning there, and you have Jewish women learning there in seminaries, and you have children, Jewish children there in kindergartens. And surrounding them are thousands and thousands of Arabs. My children and I were there. It was actually 31 years ago. Jerry might remember. We were there when Ateret Kohanim moved into a large building. And we were there. Jerry and Sylvia were small. Gailey, I think, was in a stroller. And we had, I don't know, was Jacob's family with us? Jeff with us? Yeah. Jeff, your family was with us. Jake, you were probably there. And 14 Israeli families were poised to move into a building that had been a Jewish building, but was taken by Arabs. And the Arabs started to riot. Israeli policemen and soldiers came, and they started to throw tear gas. And that was when we exited. But the building has since become a Jewish enclave with the yeshiva, with a Beit Knesset, with a play group, with several 10 or 12 Jewish families in the heart of this area. So I went back to some of those areas. We were very involved at that organization many years ago. I went back to some of those areas with Mati Dan, and we sort of rekindled an old friendship. I went to an area the day before we left. When was that? Yesterday. An area called the Yemenite village. The modern name for this village is Silwan. Anybody remember the Silwan? Anybody remember any of the history about Silwan? So in the 50s and 60s, and then again later on, that was a hotbed of terrorism. And there were multiple and ongoing attacks that came out of this very dense Arab area against the residents of Jerusalem. It sits, if you know, the old city is up here, and then there's you drop down a little bit to Ir David, to the city of David, which was all Arab as well. And then you go into a valley and a hill, and that's all the Silwan. Now, the Silwan was called the Yemenite village, and it was settled originally in 1882 by Yemenites, Olei La'aretz, people who came with very little, had very little, lived in very, very difficult conditions, and settled with views of the old city of Jerusalem. The views are breathtaking. 1929, many were driven out. 1939, the balance were driven out. Everything was destroyed, but for certain shells of certain buildings remained. And now in the 80s and 90s and today, handful of young, idealistic Jewish families are moving back into these areas. So we walked around, and it's extraordinarily dense, extraordinarily dirty, extraordinarily Arab. And every so often you come across a building with a handful of young, idealistic, beautiful Jewish families in it. And we visited with one young lady who said that she had been living there since she got married. She's married to an attorney, and she'd been living there with her children for 15 years. And she's in a building with 4 other families, and there are tens of thousands of Arabs around them. To go anywhere, you have to ring up security. We walked with her children to the park, which was about a 4-minute walk. A security guard watched us the whole way, and particularly watched the children at the park, and of course watched them coming back. When they go to the Beit Knesset, there's security watching them. When they leave the Beit Knesset, when you go to get in your car to go to the grocery store or to go to work, you have security. And the state of Israel has made the commitment to say, yes, these are Jewish areas and Jews should be back there. We can't pay to dislodge Arabs, but if you buy the buildings, we can pay to protect you. And that's what they've done. And they've done that in a very serious and real way. So we met with this young lady, and she lives in a very, very simple apartment. And she just radiated positive energy and happiness. And I was so incredibly inspired because it reconnected me to what a lot of us hold dear and a lot of us care about and a lot of us regard. And I want to share some of the insights inspired by this young lady, her little children, and a handful of the other people we met in these extraordinarily complicated places. One was the Silwan, the area above it, and the so named Arab quarter of the old city. Hey, Stephen, great to see you.
Good seeing you, Ricky.
So it goes back to what I believe is a core concept in Pesach. Now, tell me, if you had to sort of summarize 1 or 2 takeaways from Pesach, what would you say? You guys tell me. 1 or 2 takeaways from Pesach. What would you say? Huh? Freedom. My wife says freedom. Hey,
I would
Irene,
say,
how are you?
well, freedom in what way? Because,
Freedom in what way?
like,
That's it.
we are free physically, but a lot of things that I've taken away from rage and things like that is we still are slaves in other ways, like to our phones, to money, even though we're not physically slaves and chains, in a way, we're chained to other things.
Yeah, 100% right. Julia?
Yeah. You don't
Beautiful.
remember me?
Yeah, I do remember you. It's been a long time. It's very good to see you.
Good to see
That's
you.
exactly right. We are still. So
We're
let's
still in
let's
Galus exile too, right? Galus.
yeah. So let's move away from freedom and talk to me about other things that you take out of Pesach. Talk to me. Yeah, Sari?
So like I don't know, but it just like there's a cleansing, I feel. Like
Okay.
we don't only clean the house, but I kind of feel like, I don't know, it like takes us, when you like get to a new chapter of a book, there's kind of like, okay, you know, let's take the next step, or
Beautiful.
um
Okay, good. So we're going to build on that a little bit. Good. What else? What else? There is a level of freedom, although there's still a lot of non-freedom. There's a level of cleansing. Serene, what are we going to
What
say?
about unity? Just
What about
uniting as
unity? Good.
a nation, leaving Israel, all working together, believing in Hashem, becoming a nation.
Beautiful. So unity is a very big part of the holiday as well. What else? Hi, guys. Hi, Sandy and Eli. Good to see you guys. What else is a big part of the holiday?
What about tradition, like teaching our children and passing that down?
Beautiful. Our obligation, our opportunity to build our children with knowledge. Good. There's an interesting a perspective that I want to share with you tonight that I think.
Can I just,
Yeah, Joe?
sorry. I have a different thought on it. I'm looking at it as these people feel totally free enough to free enough to live wherever they choose to live. They feel it's the right thing to do, to live in Israel, particularly in that area, because there's a lot of places you can live in Israel that aren't that dangerous and that integrated and so forth. So I think they're exercising their freedom. And I think on the part of the Israelis, it's a little bit different in that they're supporting that freedom. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're supporting that freedom. It's a huge, huge thing for a government to go out of their way for, it sounds like one or two or, a couple of handful of families in this whole district to monitor their movements.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. It's tens of millions of shekel a year in each of these areas. It's a huge effort and a serious effort. I want to delve a little bit more on whether we're going to call that freedom or something. So in order to get into this a little bit further and take away the things that we need to take away in our own lives, I want us now hold that picture in our minds. Hold the picture of a radiant young lady living in a very, very simple apartment, surrounded by tens of thousands of Arabs. The outside of the apartment is broken and dirty and things you would not see in a typical Jewish area, to Joey's point, and having a strong sense of X. The question is the strong sense of what? So let's see. So hold that picture a few minutes and let's talk about how we can get there. When we look at world history, when we look at human evolution or any type of evolution, how do we qualify it? What are some of the cliches or phrases or axioms that we use to describe how the world works? What would you say?
Survival of the fittest.
Perfect. Survival of the fittest. What is survival of the fittest? Explain it, Serene. What does it mean?
I guess whoever could endure their life conditions will survive.
Right. So, right, isn't that the way we understand how the world works? The world works as based on survival of the fittest, right? Hey, Erwin, great to see you. Survival of the fittest, good. Which means that those who have power, those who have a strength advantage, survive. Very simply, we've seen it in all venues. We've seen it in terms of animals. We've seen it in terms of the plant kingdom. We've seen it in terms of the human kingdom, right? Who survives? The person who's physically stronger. So the world order, in general terms, is based on only the strong survive, survival of the fittest. Good. Now, what do we have in terms of the Jewish people in that sense? How did the Jewish people work into that? Erwin, what do you say? Good to see you. How did they work into that?
Holiday, everything good?
Great. Thank you.
Good to be Jewish again.
It's good to be Jewish again. Yeah. Let's go. How do the Jewish people fit into that?
Right, I missed the first couple minutes. I just jumped on.
Okay, so let's go. Survival of the fittest. Only the strong survive. That is defined along the lines of physical capacity, right? How did the Jewish people fit into that, Sarah? They don't.
I don't.
They simply don't. Serene, why not?
I mean, we defy all odds. We tried to be destroyed so many times that we should have been dead by now. We should have been
Right,
destroyed.
exactly. Why?
Much smaller than everybody.
What?
Right.
Just in sheer numbers, much smaller than everybody throughout this.
Sheer numbers are much smaller than everybody. Good. And we've never had the physical power, ever. We've never had the physical power. So, in fact, our survival is purely a faith-based survival, okay? Without any physical power throughout history. Let's hold that as a premise for now, and we'll see where we go with it.
Wait, Ricky, didn't we have soldiers like Yehoshua and all the,
We did. Yeah.
They were mighty men.
They were mighty men. That's right. That's true. Now, what did Yoshua do with that? And what came from that? In other words, Yoshua conquers the land of Israel, and it's true. In that sense, we're mighty men. Yeah?
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the rest of Jewish history, the 3,000 plus years since then. Have we been mighty? We haven't been mighty. And when we were mighty, that might was very regional. It was very limited. And other than conquering the land of Israel, did we ever use that might elsewhere? And the answer is no. But you want to go back one step further. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes to Abraham Avinu, he tells him when they connect, he tells Abraham Avinu that your children are going to be absolutely defenseless for the next 400 years. They're going to go down to Egypt. They're going to be enslaved. They're going to suffer, and so on. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu outlines this non-strength structured relationship that your children at the outset, they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't sin to go down to Egypt, but at the outset, they're going to go down to Egypt and they're going to be defenseless and they're going to be downtrodden and they're going to be enslaved. Sarah, you're right. We had Yoshua. We had King David. We had a few.
Maccabim.
We had the Maccabim. We had limited periods in time of power, but were defined by the lack of power. Hey, Sonny and Bobby, good to see you. We're defined by the lack of power. What does that mean? What is that about? Talk to me. What does it mean? It means something very challenging to the world. It means that as opposed to every other nation, every other perspective, every other religion that has spread itself with the power of the sword, we don't have that option. We are purely a faith-based survival nation. So what do we do with that? Where do we go with that?
Would you say it's faith-based or ideal-based? Okay,
So it's faith-based. It's faith-based, Jake. But let's see, what did some of the nations try to do with that? How did they deal with it? Let's take the time of Purim, right? Let's take the time of Purim. Oh, no, sorry. Let's go back before that. Let's take the time in Egypt. When Vayakom Melech Hadash al Mitzrayim, when a new king emerges, what does he claim in order to justify the persecution of the Jews?
We gotta keep them
He
small.
claims Nirpim atem Nirpim. They're too not unbusy. So he has to give them more work to keep them busy.
And what was he afraid of?
They have too much time. Too much time to think.
He thought they were too strong and then they were gonna gang up against them and leave and get up and leave.
They're gonna become qualified to fight a war, which they weren't. They're gonna rise up. They're gonna team up with an external enemy, and they're gonna conquer the Egyptian country, the Egyptian people. This was the precursor to a number of things that followed. What did they say in the Middle Ages? They said that we had these devils and these Satans, and we took the blood of children and we made matzot out of it. What did they say later on in the 19th and 20th century? They said that there was this international conspiracy of Jews to control all the money, to control all the power, right? The Zionist manifesto and these kinds of things that were written and are read all over the world, right? The second most read book in the world describes how the Jews really have this extraordinary physical power to control things in the world. What's the real story about that? We don't. So let's take a step back. We said the world is based on strength and physical power, the survival of the fittest. It's true. Based on the basic physical world order, those with power are those who thrive, and those who lead, and those who dominate, and those who control. For us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu modeled it differently. He said from the outside, and yes, to Sarah's point, there will be periods of strong Jewish power. But for the overwhelming majority of Jewish history, you will be powerless by design. Survival of the fittest will not apply to you by design. And what will you be? You will be faith-based survivors. Your survival will be metaphysical. Now, if I'm another nation that has a different perspective, if I'm Amalek or Christianity or Esav or Islam or the Nazis, what do? I can't fight a metaphysical enemy. Nobody can make that fight. So what do? I bring the argument down to physical terms and I say, the Jew is a physical threat. And as a result of him being a physical threat, I'm going to fight him on physical terms because otherwise they can't fight us. You know, the Nazis in those very famous trials post-World War II in Israel, right? When Eichmann was finally called and finally found guilty for all his murder, what did they call it? What did he proclaim it to be? Purim Fest. In other words, the Jews came back and showed that somehow, without any physical power, they have extraordinary world power. It's faith-based power, metaphysical power. That's what we have.
Ricky, Rick.
Yeah.
Don't you think over time, 10,000 years ago till today, that we always beat them from an intellectual or from brains?
Yeah.
I know the physical thing is a thing, but I think we blow them out of the water all the time in anything we do with the berakah that Hashem gives us with the wisdom that we have. No.
So it's true. So wisdom is part of it, right? Where do we get the wisdom from? We get the wisdom from thousands of years of learning Torah. Your wisdom and mine
Oh, but
is
come
from
on,
what
Ricky.
we acquired in our lives and what
Right.
our fathers gave us and our grandfathers and our great-great-grandfathers, the Torah that they instilled in us,
Right.
stayed in us, and that gives us an absolute qualitative advantage.
That's the blueprint, no?
Okay, but this is all non-physical, right?
No, yeah, we beat them with brains, no?
We beat them with brains and we beat them with our God relationship.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
Sarah?
You can't really say that when 6 million Jews were slaughtered
Okay.
in our,
Right.
you know.
I knew we were going there, Sarah. Just give
I
me a
know
few
you
minutes.
know it. I was holding
We're,
back, but
we're gonna talk about it. Just hang on a few minutes. We're there. So let's assume for a minute that HaKadosh Baruch Hu models it along the lines of what we're saying. You will never have a physical advantage. Why not, Erwin? Let's call it intellectual, let's call it spiritual, let's call it chesed, let's call it all of the above.
Right.
But why will the Jews never have a physical advantage?
Because they
So that they
outnumber
rely on
us.
God.
Because why?
They
They rely on
outnumber
God.
us.
So
They
that they would
outnumber
rely
us?
on.
In other words, if there's 10 million people against 10,000, we have to beat them strategically.
No, but
And anything,
make us the
business
biggest.
and war and anything.
Make us the biggest. HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have made us the biggest nation, not the smallest. Chacham, what were you going to say?
So that we rely on God. He purposely does that so we don't trust in Kochi
Exactly.
ve'otzem yadi.
That's right. So when the Christians conquer X amount of nations and convert everybody to Christianity, God is just an adjunct to that. He's not a key player in that. He's just an add-on. But when we, without the physical power, make a proclamation, study, serve, grow, build, then we, without the physical power, have created this exceptional reality, this exceptional truth. Now, let's go to the next level and move in the direction of Sarah's question. How was this established? It was established in a very interesting way. We said at Mount Sinai, Na'aseh v'nishma. We're going to sign up and we're going to spend the rest of time figuring out how to get closer and closer and closer to you, Hashem. So we're giving up any physical claim to worshiping God and to building our lives around God. And we're saying, Erwin, to your point, intellectual, to the rabbi's point, we're going to build it on a totally non-physical way. And we're going to spend the rest of time building it. And that's a very big commitment that we made. We said we're going to figure it out as we go. Okay? Now, everybody's okay with that so far?
Ricky, could I say something?
Of course.
Hi. But I feel like all other nations throughout the generations and thousands of years mostly knocked our faith and our religion and used that as an excuse to bring us down. Not, like you said, not physical, but like during the Spanish Inquisition, they knew our faith and they know our faith is strong. So they work on that to try to weaken us.
It's true. Sometimes they try to parallel it. They tried to say that we had physical strength to bring it down to their terms, right? But Sandy, you're right. Sometimes they didn't. They just said, we're going to take these people out. We have to erase them from the earth. When they made the physical arguments, they made stronger arguments against us. Because when they just come against us because of our beliefs, it's much harder for them to garner the support of the world. How do they do it today? What do they do today? They take the most moral army in the world. The Israeli army is the most moral army in the world, to the extent where many, many young, fantastic Jewish men and women have been hurt or killed because of the exceptional and overreaching levels of morality expressed towards our enemies. On the college campuses today, we have the die-ins, we have the Stop the Occupiers, we have thousands of organizations, many of them led or membered by Jews, proclaiming a power that the Jewish people have to hurt other people that is completely baseless, completely baseless. So yes, we're winning, we've stayed alive because of our spiritual connection, and that's the primary story. And we've been attacked because of our spiritual connection, but it's very hard for people to attack us based on that. So they'll very often try and impute certain power to us, like the Zionist conspiracy or the corrupt Israeli army or the International Criminal Court now investigating Israeli army officers and soldiers. When Assad murdered 500,000 people, that's the official number. That's the official number. Millions and millions have been displaced. And Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, the most polluted, filthy countries in the world, don't go under the scrutiny of the International Criminal Court, but the Israeli army does. So it invariably comes back to a desperate opportunity to fight fire with fire. Yeah, Sarah, you were going to say something?
I was just, I mean, I wouldn't say it about the Holocaust, but, you know, we learned that before the Jews were slaves in Egypt, that the Jews, didn't you tell us that like the Jews were landowners, that we had our own land and that we did multiply? So the Jewish people were a real threat. And because of them growing so quickly. So
we were never a threat. We were never a threat. We never proclaimed any empire building perspectives. It was never, you don't see it anywhere in Jewish history. You never see in Jewish history this perspective of we're gonna take over the world, we're gonna convert people to Judaism, we're gonna conquer lands beyond the land of Israel. You don't see it. It's not part of our Ophi. You know, to the present day, in the simplest terms, the Israeli army is called the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. You know, Israel ideally wouldn't want an army because they wouldn't want to fight anybody. You know, Golda Meir said it so beautifully, Aleh Shalom. She said, we can forgive you for killing our sons, but we can't forgive you for forcing us to kill yours. Now, that was a gigantic statement from a lady who lived through the worst anti-Semitism in Europe and rose to be one of the most acclaimed female leaders in the world. When she turned to, I think it was Sadat, when she met him and she said that to him, what did that speak to? It spoke to the fact that we never wanted this fight, and we never did. We never did. We were never imperialistic. We were never conquerors. We laid a claim to our own land, and that was it. And that's where it began and ended. Now, when you establish this, you establish this curious mantra about us. And it's to Erwin's point, but beyond. Somehow, with our intellectual achievements, with our spiritual achievements, with our achievements of chesed, somehow we build a relationship with God and we become the most noteworthy people on the planet. Now, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He doesn't only care about us. He puts us out into the world in what we call galut, or a diaspora existence. For what purpose? For a few. The first one is to challenge the world order of survival of the fittest, of only the strong survive, and to speak about the fact that the most moral survive, the most ethical survive, the most caring survive. I'll never forget, I was there during one of the Gaza wars when missiles were flying from Gaza, and then I was actually there when missiles were flying from Lebanon. And what you saw was a remarkable thing. You saw people with a 3-room apartment taking in strangers' families with 5 children. I saw it. I saw it. There was not enough room in the 3-room apartment for the family living there. Now there's another family with 5 kids in the same apartment for several weeks, 7 weeks that the Gaza war lasted. There's thousands of stories like this. So what Pesach reminds us of is that we are completely non-physical in our notoriety, in our power. Now that has its obligations to us, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But let's go one step further in the direction of Sarah's question. In order for this to work, in order for us to be the seekers, the non-physical power people, what does God have to do? What does God have to do? What would you say?
Make us challenge us.
Challenge us, but even more than that. Bobby, what do you say? What does God have to do in order for this to work? Let me ask you the question differently. What if God was very overt in his lockstep partnership with the Jewish people? What would that do to the world?
No one would touch us.
Huh? No one would touch us, right? Exactly like the Chacham said. Nobody would touch us. What does that mean? What does it mean? It means the game would be over. It means our journey will have ended. It means we will have overwhelmed the world with our strength. If God were to say that a Jewish person will never be hurt, that a Jewish tragedy, lo aleinu, will never happen, what does that mean? If God were to show himself fully, outwardly on our behalf, there wouldn't be any contest anymore. We would have the strongest of all armies. So in order for God to allow us primarily and everybody else to ultimately find him, he has to be somewhat in secret. He has to be overwhelmingly discreet. Because, Erwin, if he showed up at the door in full armor, with full weaponry, saying, I love the Jewish people, right? How many people would stand up against us? Anybody? Of course not. Nobody would. So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to do? Primarily for us, and secondarily for everybody else, he has to be hidden. He has to be obscure. He has to be sought out and not prevalent in our faces or anybody else's.
Right. But Ricky,
Right?
you said something before that triggered me. You said that maybe the wild card is the chesed, that is the ammunition to get God to give us the power. No?
Some people say that. Some people say it's our chesed.
No, I didn't. You aligned me with that thought. Like, hey, we do all this chesed. Hashem said, these guys are good kids, and let me bail them out.
Okay. But it's not only chesed. It's a chesed. It's
Combination.
The learning, it's a self-sacrifice. It's the whole package.
I got it.
Yeah. But I want you to be clear on something. The only way this works is if God is somewhat hidden. Otherwise, if he comes out fully, the game is over. Everybody would run to God. Let me ask you something. If every time in life you did a mitzvah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you a benefit, would there be anything left to life? If every time we did a mitzvah, we got a candy, we got a credit, we made another $100, what would that mean?
No, it wouldn't be. It would be a different motivation, because my concept is that all the chesed that a person does, he stores it, and then you draw. It's like a line of credit. You draw down.
Good. Very nice, beautiful.
No, I mean that's why
you always have these great classic slogans there.
Ricky, what about when Mashiach comes? Like, when the whole world's supposed to be.
Beautiful, Sonny. Beautiful, beautiful. Hold on to that for a couple minutes. We're going to get to that point.
Ricky, did you ever see the movie The Stepford Wives?
I don't think so.
Everybody was the same. Everybody was polite. Everybody was kind to each other. It was such a boring world.
Right.
Exactly. Like every day was the same. Every day was the same.
Perfect. If God was in our face, we would have the power. We would have the army of one, of God. So if God makes the commitment for the Jewish people to be exemplary, to be the leaders of the world based on non-power, he can't overly show himself. He has to be hidden. He has to be sought out. We have to work hard. We have to sit in a village of 200,000 Arabs, 50 Jewish families spread out, total 200, 300 people, and we have to know that he's there with us. That's what we're talking about. And when we know he's there with us, or when we in Brooklyn do something that we know HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, that we know that he supports, that he knows he wants to see built in us, we're going out on a limb. We don't know that he's going to pat me on the back 10 minutes later. I asked this young lady, I said, you consider yourself a hero? She goes, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. This is what I believe is the way, one of the key ways that I can build my family to love God, the Jewish country, and the Jewish people. End of story. But wait a second. There's 200,000 Arabs around you that a few years ago were throwing Molotov cocktails at your children. Did you forget that? No, I didn't forget it. But I also didn't forget that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to keep getting closer to him and searching for him and finding him and doing chesed and learning and so on. If there was never a Molotov cocktail, there wouldn't be a young lady like that. There wouldn't be a class like this. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu was out there full view, there wouldn't be anything. So the point I want to drive in tonight's class is that our belief, our greatness is one of discovery that's been going on for millennia. It will continue. The discovery is personal. It's step by step. It's one step forward. It's a half a step back. And that's why it's spectacular, because it ain't obvious and it ain't known and it's not a big tank. And that's the way we embrace God. Good. Sarah, you look like you got something cooking. You okay?
No, you know me, I'll still never understand the Holocaust. So
let's go further. Let's go further. So why is there suffering? Why is there suffering? And Sarah, I need you to really think about this point. I need you to seriously consider it, as we all need to. Our rabbis go one step further at this point. So the first point they mention is that ours is a metaphysical, not a physical existence. Ours is a metaphysical reckoning and recognizing, not a physical one. It's antithetical to the physical one. And we shouldn't be chasing it in physical quarters. You know, when you ask the average European how many Jews there are in the world of 7 billion, they'll tell you 100 million. Really? Some will tell you more. Some will tell you 30% of Europe is Jewish. What if it was less than 1%? But that's the reality. So we said that this is our strength. We said that in order for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to allow us to find our strength, he has to be hidden. Because if he was overt, there wouldn't be anything anymore. It would all be over. It would be too obvious and too simple. But there's one more element that comes in, and Sarah, this speaks to your point on some level. The lack of free choice in the world would be the end of the world. So, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says the following: I need to build a world that's governed by Mamlechet Kohanim, Goy Kadosh, Am Segula, this great nation of the Jewish people. We started out way back when with Adam, with Abraham. We split. Our powers were dissipated somewhat. Our extraordinary ability to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu was squandered somewhat, and we're going to reclaim it. And that's our destiny. And that's the destiny of humanity. So he says, I have to be somewhat hidden. And he says, I have to give all of humanity choices. And one of the choices that I have to give them is a choice to perpetuate the most horrific evils that a human being can perpetuate. That's a choice. Because if that wouldn't be a choice, then the greatest good couldn't be a choice either. Now, is that a rationale for the Holocaust? No. But is it a context to understand the world that A, we win with intellect and chesed and spirituality and prayer? Yes, that's true. B, could we win with that if God was overtly in our face? Game would be over. Listen, if a father controls all of his children, do the children have an identity? As fathers, don't we want to input our core values into our kids? Don't we work real hard to do that? We do. Don't we stop short of controlling their lives? Yes. Why? Because then they wouldn't be them. They would be us. There would be no point to having them. We need them to be them. And the same thing is true. God needs man to be man. He needs man to be able to be evil. Because if you can't be evil, you can't be great. If you can't be a terrorist, you can't be a heroine. You can't. And that's the way it has to be, because otherwise it wouldn't be really free. So the morality or immorality of the world is all tied together to this destiny, to this metaphysical armor that we have. And as a result of that, sometimes absolutely horrific things are going to happen. Now, can we call God to task on those? Sure. And maybe one day we'll understand more. But in the meantime, if we understand the world order, we understand our responsibility, but more importantly, our possibility. It's a remarkable life. If I had the choice to take up a gun and make my opinion known, or give a class and make my opinion known, which would be more beautiful? Which would be more sincere? What would be more human? What would be more eternal? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you're going to build eternity with words, with spirituality, with chesed, not with a gun. Is there going to be a gun? Yeah. Is that gun going to hurt a lot of people? Yeah. Is that an excusable thing? No. Is it part of a real world? Unfortunately, it is. So, when we think about Pesach, when we walk away from Pesach, we say, nobody has the power we have. Nobody has it. It's not the strength of my fist, and it never will be. By the way, does anybody believe that Israel wins wars by the strength of the army? Come on. Any serious person knows that that's not true. The miracles that go on there every day are just adding up. They just add up. All you got to do is talk to the taxi drivers. Every taxi driver over there wants to be the prime minister, believes he's smarter than the prime minister, smarter than everybody else. Right, Sonny? You remember, right? Smarter than everybody else. And they'll tell you that it's a land of overt miracles. But we don't have to go that far. We go into our own lives. So let's reclaim the notion that we have the greatest power. How is that power defined? When I open a book and I study, when I do an act of chesed, when I reach beyond myself in a spiritual realm, that gives me power like nobody else. And that's the story of Mitzrayim. That's the story of Egypt. That's the story of Pesach. That's the story of Purim. That's the story of the Holocaust. That's the story of the state of Israel. That's the story of the Yemenite village. This young lady, everybody there is afraid of her because intellectually and morally, she soars above all of them, as do we in our own lives. As long as we have Torah to guide us, as long as we're learning something new every day, as long as we're reaching beyond ourselves to find areas of pain that we need to address. Chesed doesn't come to our door, right? In the Seder, we invite people in. Anybody who's hungry, anybody who's in pain, come. And when they don't come, what's our job? Is to go out and chase and find them. We have to be clear that if we don't have people in pain in our immediate universe, we need to go down the block and around the corner and to another neighborhood and find them. Find them. That's the power we have to exercise. That's how we become. That's how we find God. There's another important element, and we'll just pull it together with this. And it's a very unusual element, but it's so telling. What is the element of the ger in this whole picture? What does the convert have to have with this whole beautiful, idyllic possibility of the Jewish people as the people of non-physical power, ultimately bringing the world to its greatest level? What does the ger or the convert have to do with it? What do you say? Got you on this one, huh, Erwin?
No, I'm saying that if someone converts, they're switching gears because it sounds like a better program to them, maybe.
It's a better program to them, and what else?
The fact that, they could see Hashem even though he's hidden, and that they're making the move just, exemplifies it even more.
That's right. And we have particular concerns and particular structure in our own community. But and what was done was absolutely right and saved our community, in many people's opinion, including mine. But in the Jewish community in general, the role of the ger is essential. Without the ger, there are neshamic elements that we don't possess that will never come to us. So from a Kabbalistic point of view, our rabbis say very interesting. They say that the neshama of Adam, Harishon, Adam, split. And part of that split went to Moshe Rabbeinu, and part of that split went to Gerim, people who weren't immediately identified as Jews. Over time, as we are out there in the world, being champions in every area of life we are today, whether it be Nobel Prizes or scientific discoveries or music or architecture or literature or whatever it might be, or morality, those people's lives are touched by us. And as time goes on, and particularly in the time period that we're reaching now, really getting close to Mashiach, more and more of those people will step forward and say, you know what? It ain't with a gun. And that's not how you do it. You do it with a book. You do it with a book. You do it with a Bible. You do it with a kind word. That's how you do it. And our rabbis say that without the ger, we won't complete it. So when they talk about in the Haggadah that there were people learning in Bnei Brak until the crack of dawn, and someone came in and told them, hey, listen, everybody, you went through the whole night. If you keep learning, you're going to miss the time of Shema. It's a very interesting story with a lot of interesting elements to it. But one of the interesting elements is that the people learning there are identified as the children of Israel's greatest enemies, the children of Nebuchadnezzar, the children of Amalek, the children of those who tried to destroy us. So, as we follow our path throughout history to non-physically dominate the world with our intellect, with our kindness, and so on, we will inspire millions of people, as is already happening. So, and that ultimately puts the package together to bring Mashiach. So where does this put us? It puts us in a fantastic place. It says that coming out of Pesach, and again, you know, on the one hand, I think it was wonderful that everybody, you know, was able to get out and run and do and travel and this and that this holiday. So many people were able to do it. Thank God we were able to do it. But at the same time, we have to remember what happened just 12 months ago when we were talking about, those of us who were learning together at the time, we were talking about making Pesach Seders with just 2 people. And that's what most of us did at the time. So when you think about the transition from one year to the next, the hope and the prayer is that we don't go back to normal. We don't forget last year's Pesach. We don't forget how HaKadosh Baruch Hu moved us through this thing. For some reason, moved the world to another place, a very unknown place, but a place where our relationship with him will become even more important. Our ability to move the world through non-force, through intellect and spirit and chesed and morality will become even more pronounced. This is the world we're living in. You know, you can't win a war anymore with guns in the world, right? We all know that, right? The world strategists talk about that the next world war, God forbid it should happen, will be a financial war, because tanks and airplanes, they're not going to do anything. Or it'll be a war of information, or it'll be a war of health. But it's not going to be a conventional war. That can't work anymore. That can't beat anybody anymore.
No, it doesn't scale.
Huh?
No, it doesn't scale. Years ago, you say that. Today with technology, or like you say, nuclear, or it has a magnitude of scaling 1,000 times of things of 100 years. I mean, it has really a possibility of destroying the world, not 10,000 people or whatever, a city or whatever, a village.
But that's not where the world sees itself based on what I've seen. Where does the world see itself? It's about knowledge and opinion. And the most powerful segments of the world today, and that's where the big fights are in the world of ideas. Whose ideas are going to control? Is it Facebook's ideas? Is it Twitter's ideas? Is it Trump's ideas? Is it Putin's ideas? Is it China's ideas? Is it Judaism's ideas?
Right.
Because they understand that the Geulah, they don't use that term, but the Geulah is upon us. And the Geulah means it's all about ideas. It's all about spirituality. That's what's going to build the world. So when we move away from Pesach, we should be embracing the fact that our core strength is in the non-physical. Our core opportunities are in the non-physical. Our core freedom is in the non-physical. That's where we should be. So let's walk out of Pesach after we said Shehecheyanu. When I said Shehecheyanu this year in Israel with my daughter and my new grandson, and last year it was just my wife and me sitting alone and greeting Jerry and my children and Abby and Bobby outside on the porch later on, right? I almost couldn't control my emotions saying Shehecheyanu. So that's where we want to be. It's not a physical thing. It's not a strength thing. It's a absolutely non-physical, spiritual story that we write. We write. Just like this young lady in the apartment. You in your house, she in her house, him in his house, me in my house. We're writing the script. And we're writing the script by opening another page of the Chumash, by saying another word in the Siddur, by reaching out and finding people in pain. Find them. They're there. If we're not finding people in pain, we're not growing. We're not bringing the Geulah. If there isn't anybody around the corner, because I helped them all already, find somebody down the next block. And this is where we need to be. And this gives us strength. And this is freedom. And this is the greatest possibility. Is it ever going to be black and white? Thank God it isn't. Because if it was black and white, we'd have absolutely nothing to do. So that's what we want. And that's what I believe is a great message. And when I think about this young lady sitting amongst tens of thousands of Arabs with a beautiful glow and a beautiful smile and a quiet sense of purpose, it's no different than any of us. We're doing the same thing in a different venue, building beautiful children who have beautiful values, who love us and love each other. That's a gigantic achievement. Who have confidence, who have a sense of purpose, who belong to a beautiful community, who love a synagogue, who love to do chesed, who fill the offices of our chesed organizations, and we have too many volunteers and not enough jobs for them to do. We're doing it. We're building the Geulah by doing that as well. The message is look for it in those areas. Define it for ourselves and globally and nationally in those areas, in the non-physical areas, in learning, in morals, in chesed. That's where we want to be. I think that that will continue to bring the Geulah. And I'll tell you, closing note, there was something different in the land of Israel this year. There was something different. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something happening. These things are changing. And I think we're growing everywhere. Our community is at an unprecedented level of learning, of chesed, of tzedakah. We have broken every imaginable level. And for those of us who have seen a few generations can say it. We never had this much Torah. We never had this much chesed. We never had this much giving and sharing and growing. And thank God it's not perfect, because then it wouldn't be anything. Good. Any thoughts? Jake, you're quiet, honey. Any thoughts?
No, not, I think it's great.
You're okay? Serene, any thoughts?
I just keep thinking about how the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed because of the Sinat Chinam. So it really goes along with what you said, that's how Mashiach's gonna come, by caring about one another.
Yeah, it's a very important point you're saying. I want to say something to Serene's point, because Rav Soloveitchik writes something fascinating on that. He says Sinat Chinam, Jem, could you bring some water? He says Sinat Chinam is not it's not a direct action, it's an outgrowth of something. Rav Soloveitchik says that when the Jewish people lost their will to triumph, to lead, to dream, to imagine, to take risks, then they no longer sought out unconditional love. They no longer sought out growth. He says the great calamities in Jewish history, the spies in the desert, the lack of unconditional love, and all of those things, he says those are symptomatic. Those are not the cause. The cause is a lack of movement, a lack of growth, a lack of ambition. And when people are passive, then their levels of action, their levels of care all drop down to a point where you have things like a lack of avat chinam. It's a very interesting perspective. He says all of the calamities have come not from the symptomatic things that we talk about. He said those did really happen. But why did those happen? Because we didn't fight. We didn't reach. We didn't dream. We didn't try to find more chesed. We didn't try to find new ways to learn. We didn't try to find new ways to identify with God. We didn't try to find new ways to pray and understand Tefillah better. So it's an interesting approach that he...
Basically, what you're saying that he said is that complacency is in Judaism is contagious. If you're complacent, you don't have passion in one area.
You know what, Chacham? He says that complacency in Judaism is the most destructive element there could be. That's how I understand the Rav. And the flip side is true. That action, hitnadvut, sacrifice, that's the number one thing that can be.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful nuts. I was just relating to what you said. So it sounds to me that the way I didn't read what he said, but the way you're explaining it is that when a person's complacent and doesn't strive to do more chesed, more everything, so he lacks passion in every area. Yeah, he lacks the love for the other Jew. There's a certain decrease in level in areas of ahavat chinam, etc.
Yep. So let's raise the bar again. Whatever we're doing, let's raise the bar. Add a minute to this. Add an hour to that. Let's raise the bar. We've said it a number of times in other contexts. I'm sorry to repeat it, but it's important and it's building on what the rabbi said as well. So when we're raising the bar, when we're shouting more to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we're grabbing more of that power, that non-physical power that only we have, it's transformative. We're different. We feel different. We look different. You know what? In my own life, when I'm learning and I'm doing chesed, I'm having a totally great time. Just having a great time. And that's what we want. We want to be having a great time. So let's embrace this extraordinary non-physical strength that we have. Let's build it nationally by building it individually. And this way we continue to bring Mashiach. And just one sidebar, I really believe that in this tkufa, in this period between Pesach and Shavuot, when we have Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut, Yom Yerushalayim, we're going to talk about it more in depth, but this is the most remarkable period on the Jewish calendar. We go from Cherut to Matan Torah, and in the middle of Cherut and Matan Torah, we have the three most important days in modern Jewish history. We have Israel Remembrance Day, we have Independence Day, and we have the celebration of the day that we reunified Jerusalem, all in this time period. They weren't spread out. And it puts together what I would call a chut mishulash, the chain, the three-level chain of things that can't be broken. You have freedom, you have the land of Israel, you have Torah Yisrael, the Torah of Israel, all baked into this time period of the year. So it's an enlightened time, it's an extraordinary time. And how do you build the great national possibility? By building the individual possibility. And that's where we get our strength. Good.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ricky. Hazaka Baruch.
Thoughts? We're good? Everybody okay? All
Thank
right.
you, yes. Great class.
See
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you.